The sun burned high over the dusty plains of Arizona as guests began, arriving at the Miller Ranch for what many called the strangest wedding the West had ever seen. The invitations had gone out a week before, handwritten by the rancher himself, Luke Miller, a man known for his hard hands, steady eyes, and a heart that few ever really understood. When the townsfolk read that the bride was deaf, laughter rippled across saloons and porches. A deaf bride? How's she gonna hear her vows? One man scoffed at the bar. Maybe the preacher will use hand signs? Another jeered. By the morning of the ceremony, the whole town had decided to witness the spectacle. Not out of joy, but curiosity and mockery. Luke stood tall by the wooden archway, his tan hat pulled low, his best shirt clean but creased at the shoulders. His horse stood tethered nearby, the same one he rode the night he met her. Her name was Evelyn, and he'd found her by the river, alone, scared, and unable to speak a word. She was beautiful, not in a loud or polished way, but in the kind of quiet beauty that humbles a man. Her eyes spoke when her lips couldn't. She communicated with her hands, her expressions, and her silence. And somehow, that silence healed something in Luke that the noise of the world never could. But the crowd didn't see that. They only saw difference. As Evelyn stepped down from the wagon, the murmurs began. She wore a simple white dress that fluttered in the warm wind, her hair braided with wildflowers. She smiled nervously, unaware of the cruel laughter behind her back. A few men chuckled, and a woman whispered, "Bless her heart. She don't even know what they're saying." Luke heard it all. His jaw tightened, and his hand rested on his belt buckle as if to anchor himself from saying something he'd regret. The preacher, a kind old man who'd known Luke since childhood, waited with understanding in his eyes. When Evelyn reached Luke, she smiled up at him, that same soft, steady smile that had won him over on the day they met. She didn't need to hear the music to know what was happening. She could feel it. The vibrations of the guitar strings, the rhythm of boots shuffling in the dirt. Her body read the world in ways others couldn't. As the ceremony began, Luke signed the words, "I love you," with his hands, a gesture he had learned for her. She smiled, her eyes glistening, and returned the sign. Some guests exchanged awkward looks, unsure if they should laugh or be quiet. One man muttered, "Ain't much of a wedding if the bride can't hear her own vows." The sound carried far enough for Luke to catch it. He stepped closer to Evelyn, holding her hands tightly as the preacher began the vows. Luke didn't need to speak loudly. He spoke clearly, and his voice carried the weight of something real. "I don't care if the world can't understand us," he said. "I only care that you do." Evelyn watched his lips and smiled as she read every word. When the preacher asked if anyone had objections, a nervous chuckle spread through the crowd. Luke's best man shifted uncomfortably, afraid the ceremony might spiral into mockery. But Luke stayed calm. He looked at the faces before him, the ones who came to laugh, to gossip, to judge, and for a moment, silence fell. The wind rustled through the grass, dust danced in the sunlight, and Evelyn's hands trembled in his. That's when he turned toward them and said, with a voice steady as stone, "Laugh if you want. She can't hear your words, but I can, and I pity you for them." The laughter stopped. The preacher hesitated, unsure what would happen next. Luke placed a hand on Evelyn's cheek, whispering softly so only she could read his lips. "You're my world, Evie. You're better than all the noise they'll ever make." The sun dipped lower as the crowd gathered for the reception outside the barn. A long wooden table stood ready with bread, stew, and whiskey. But the laughter still lingered, quieter now, but still present in sidelong glances and half-hidden smirks. Evelyn tried her best to smile through it. She couldn't hear their words, but she could feel the energy, the way some people's shoulders turned away, the way their lips curved in false kindness. Luke noticed everything. He kept a hand on her back as they walked through the guests. When she smiled, he smiled. When she looked confused, he explained gently, his fingers moving in the signs she had taught him. He was learning, clumsy but earnest, and she adored him for it. But when a drunken cowboy at the end of the table raised his glass and said, "To Luke and the quiet lady, may she never argue back," the entire ranch went silent. The moment froze. Evelyn looked at Luke, not sure what was said, but sensing the tension in the air. Luke turned slowly toward the man, his boots scraping against the wood floor. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. You think she's weak because she can't hear you," he said, every word sharp as a knife. "You think your noise makes you strong?" He paused, his eyes scanning the crowd. "She's lived her whole life in silence, but she's braver than any man here. When the world turned its back, she learned to read faces, to see truth where others lie. She don't need to hear words. She can see hearts. And right now she can see who's worth standing beside her." The cowboy lowered his glass, ashamed. No one spoke. The wind outside whistled through the gaps in the barn walls, and the light of the setting sun spilled across Evelyn's face, making her look like something sacred. Luke turned back to her and smiled softly. "You're better than all of them," he said, his voice trembling. Evelyn read his lips, tears filling her eyes. She touched his hand and signed, "I know." The rest of the evening passed quietly. The same people who had come to laugh now watched in silence as the rancher and his deaf bride danced under the open sky. No music, just the rhythm of footsteps and hearts beating in sync. The town never mocked her again after that day. Some said they'd never seen a love so pure, so steady. And as Luke led her out onto the porch, where the stars began to flicker above, he turned once more to the guests who still lingered and said, "You all came to see a show, but what you saw was love." He looked into the camera and smiled faintly. "If you believe in love that speaks louder than words," he said, "subscribe to this channel, because we tell stories that remind you what the heart can still hear."